Hey, welcome back, everyone. I'm going to be exploring the Emperor today. We did the Empress last time, if you checked in. And by the way, if you're following along, thanks so much for joining in. I enjoy learning about the Thoth because there's so much symbolism in it. I was a little overwhelmed, and so, taking it bite size makes it a little bit easier. Now, I'm going to send out a shout out to Boujee Mystic because he went ahead and got a journal, told me he's enjoying the series and looking forward to it. And I wanted to let people know about his station. He gave me a shout out at about a month ago, and now I'm giving him one. And it's not the prettiest writing here, but you can see it is Boujee Mystic, and it's at _Boujee_Mystic. Now, he's got a lot of healing videos. He's so approachable, so warm and friendly, and he talks about books and decks, and he's got a magical side to him, a little bit mysterious. And the latest video is all about a grimoire protection doll, so I'm going to be checking that one out. But here we are back at the journal. And I wanted to show, because one of the books we're talking about the pairing, the Empress and the Emperor. And there are some contrasts, the blue, very cool, all the feminine roundness here. Even in her facial features, if you compare, there is a little bit of sharpness here on the jawline, but here we've got the warmth of the fiery red orange. We've got harsh sort of geometric lines, and it's the chiseled jaw and that stance that says, hey, I'm in control. He likes his structure, his order, but let's walk through some of the symbolisms that are in here. Now we do see some, though, before I put the Empress away, that repeat. So we have the orb here again, and it's the Maltese cross they talk about here. We have the repeating shield, but this time it's in the oranges. Instead of the swan, we have the lamb. So let's delve in and see what we've actually got for the Emperor. Well, there's a light side and a shadow side right off the bat, and he looks over his right shoulder into the darkness. This is a man who likes to have clear insights, and that gives him his strength on how to move forward. So these rays here infusing him, particularly like from shoulder to almost elbow, he's sitting here in this light. So I think of the light as guidance and clarity. And then when we have the darker side over here, the shadow side, this can be, as it indicated in the book, referring to some of the more difficult aspects, I guess, of the Emperor. That he can't always be light and happy. There are sides to him that are darker. When I think of my father, who was a Capricorn, and this sometimes does come up for the father figure, and it would often in readings for other people come up as the father figure or someone who had a lot of control. And there's nothing wrong with having structure and control unless it's taken to excess, which is going into the shadow side here. So they can be quite forceful people. And there are some women that take on the role of the Emperor. So for me growing up, it was definitely that controlling side that I saw, the limitations. But it was always, I think, done as a fatherly way of protection, just that it seemed a little bit excessive and harsh. So I definitely saw the shadow side. With this crown here, there are some symbols. If we start right here at the top, the circle with the cross. Now that was talking about structuring of the infinite, and it appears here several times on his crown. And unlike the Empress, where her crown is very soft and brings in the cycles of the moon. His is very sharp. And thinking back to my father too, they do have a sharp sense, a keen sense, and they can be very sharp-witted, but also there's an aggressiveness sometimes in how they approach people, and their words can be a little bit too pointed. But there are pros and cons to each of us. So let's look a little further. The ram's head bring in the fiery power, that action, that driving force that they have. The Maltese cross we talked about here in his hands, but he has also a scepter. And that is all about rulership and the need to strive and conquer. Now, these little bees came up on the female form too, on her outfit. Very soft. It's a little bit more pronounced here. And for this one, the bees were a way of perception, yes, but also group effort. This is a guy who is really good at leadership and getting people to work together. Whereas I think of the Empress, I sometimes mix her with the High Priestess. There's that alone type feature that runs through her. Even though she's a mother and she's very caring, I think she's got a lot of independence as well. So these discs came up. Now, if you think of them as coins, it can be about security and wealth. But it really got fascinating when I found out that these 16 points on the star actually mean something. And it did go into that transformative nature and order and truth. But when I researched on YouTube, it talked about these 16 points of the star. And it was all about interconnectedness, balance, harmony of both the material and the spiritual. But then I thought, well, what about the two discs? Because then it's 32 points. And that was when it got a little bit interesting too, because 32, it stands for people who have energy and that need to express themselves creatively, fire-wise, passionate-wise. So you can bring some geometry into it as well. It did bring in the arms and the head forming a triangle, and this being the, a T almost for the sulfur symbol, which is another fiery masculine type symbol. Hang on a second here. Okay, now this is to indicate the symbol for a letter, which is ideas and concepts, the fleur-de-lis. Not always, but in this one it did talk about royalty and this double-headed eagle that is not in the cool signs, but in the fiery. Again, that sun, that burning sun, that nature, that natural, just break away the clouds. Let's find our strength. Let's get going. And he's very much about structure. I just couldn't get past it. The first, this hard chiselness, because it did bring out that harder side of him. But he is action-oriented. They are passionate. And there is that need to protect and be in control of his environment. So quite the character. Now, in a relationship, you might find that if they are, tapping into the emperor energy, your partner, that they do need that structure. Their world sort of has to be in that manner. They need things clear, clean, orderly. And in a marriage, I could see sometimes the character towards my mother in that this fella was very possessive. They do like to be positive, although I don't always see my father in that way. but they are very much the leader, the explorer. They don't express or show any fear that I saw. They're very solid, but they also don't like to be wrong, which was interesting. Now, I also found from one of the other books that if we look at the fours, that can be interesting as well. So let's see, we start with the swords, we go cups, coins, and wands. So this is again from the Thoth deck. So there is our Four of Swords, and they do come into this point here. Now, I haven't studied the Four of Swords, but it did talk about the word here, truce, and bringing that four, because the four runs through the deck, and what do all the fours signify? Well, this one with truce is, as an emperor, knowing when that maybe there has to be a little bit of a truce in order to work through a situation, a temporary step back so that things can maybe even be negotiated. Might be a moderator coming in, but definitely looking at the four energy and how it carried over. This would be thoughts to me. And even in his mind, knowing that he needed to step back a little bit. And then the Four of Hearts was more internally. But I look at this luxury as being, having that opportunity to celebrate some of the things that you have established or accomplished. And that was kind of neat. So they talked about internal and external balance so that you can have that luxurious feeling like things are flowing here. Although he doesn't look emotional, and this is sort of cool, and he's very hot, sometimes we have to appreciate our accomplishments and celebrate them. And then we go on to the Four of Coins. This one is pretty severe looking card. And it was about limits and knowing those limits, and I guess working within the parameters. It's interesting that it looks to me like an Egyptian site, and you've got these walkways in order to explore this, but definite boundaries again. Although this looks a little fluid in here. Okay, and then we have the Four of Wands, another fiery card. And for me, generally, a celebration card, being part of the community. And, a good leader brings that sense of community together. It'll be interesting to explore the doves with the rams when I get to this card. We have the solar energy in the center, and everything looks balanced. But again, we have another star forming in here. So with the Four of Wands, it was like completion, and, knowing what needs to be done in order to have that completion. But it's green and there's a lot of growth, and we have our astrological symbols as well. So that was kind of fun to look at that. Now, some of the questions that came up in one of the book, if you should get this card in a reading, it was ask yourself, are you feeling ambitious? Is there a need to seek out structure, to rebuild something? Do you need parameters? Are you over-controlling a situation at this time? Because he is such a motivator and he is of the fire suit, I get a little bit of the Sagittarian feeling running through him, that even though he's a leader, there's that sense in a good leader that when push comes to shove, he can step off his throne and lend a hand. In a relationship, who holds the power? Maybe it switches back and forth, which is great for balance. But it did talk a little bit down here about the lamb, and that sometimes there's sacrifices that need to be made in order for victory. And, I think of the lamb sometimes in a negative way, in that, are we following or are we part of the push forward. So that was kind of fun. Gemstones, yes, my father wore a black onyx. So that is the gemstone for this card. And that does, though it says go into the darker side. Rock crystal would be more like these geometric rays around here, bringing clarity and vision. So I just wanted to finish off with a deck that I made a while ago, and I haven't looked at it for a bit. And I pulled out the cards because I think that the Emperor is very strong. And sometimes we have to tap into our own strengths. But there is, this was from, I think, a book from a thrift store, cut it all apart, glued it onto some playing card stock, because I wasn't finding at the time some really good, strong, masculine energy decks. And I thought if I'm reading for men, they might appreciate something a little bit stronger, which might make them feel more comfortable. But that is the Emperor, and I think this was from books like Warcraft or whatever. But it was just for my own use and for reading with other people. But I never got a chance because it seemed every time I took out a different deck, they all would go and gravitate to the RWS, something they knew quite well. So if we looked at the Emperor again, the traditional Thoth one, this is quite different, but still for me, strong. And you've got the direct gaze. He's got his outfit on. He's ready to do battle if need be. Interesting. And then it said also to bring in the death card because 13 translates to 4 as well. So there is the death card that I chose for my tarot deck that I created and had fun doing so. And it's always a challenge, but it really makes you look at the definitions and try to pick a card accordingly. So that is my death card, and it almost looks like a death mask. And, if you're thinking of transformation, you can't see the eyes. You don't really know what's going on, but you get a sense of things are going to change. There is my 4 of Wands. Trying to bring in a little bit of community. It's kind of dark, eh? There we go, a little bit more light there. Okay, and then this is my 4 of Coins. And I liked the idea of the face there, but you get to see a little bit of the man out and about. And then we have my 4 of Cups. Don't know really why I chose this one, but there is that sense of fluid energy around this person. It's almost one of those water benders. And then my 4 of Swords. And I get the feeling again with this one, I think of the 4 of Swords almost as rest, retreat, regroup, rethink, and then come back to battle. Pull that down a bit. I'm so enthralled with the cards. I haven't seen them in a while. And again, that vacant look, so you can bring your own ideas and feelings to it all. And I thought you might get a kick out of that. If you want to see the whole deck one day, just let me know. This is the box that I put it in because females can be warriors too. And it's got a lot of weight to it. So that is my homemade deck for the masculine. And a little heads up, I'm going to be doing my 10 top tarot decks for, delving into the masculine energy. That's coming up, so stay tuned for that one. But if you're following along, I hope that you're able to get a screenshot of all this information. Take what you want. If it doesn't appeal to you, as the books always say, leave it behind and use what works for you. So enjoy yourselves. If you're following along, the next one is going to be an interesting one. That is the Pope. And I look forward to hearing and talking with you as we work through the Thoth deck. Cheers!